see. Which is the one that's connected to the...
This one.
This one? Okay.
Yeah. It's coming. It's just,
No, it just went off.
Oh, path, I see. Diallo will be in a second. What are you looking for?
I need to have the people. Here, let me, I'll use that. Rhoda, Kolil, Sandra, Niekirk, Mariama, and Elyes, could you please go to the front? And Tanya.
Comrades, can we start, please? Comrades, we on Roundtable 2, and this is the Africa Roundtable session. We've done with Asia, we're going to Africa, and then we'll have other regions present. This is a pretty intensive part of the program because it's many presentations, and we would require some revolutionary patience to get through the program. But as we saw with the previous panel, there are many interesting and different struggles and issues being raised with us to reflect on and work out how we take these struggles forward in different parts of the region. So with the Africa session, we're going to start in no particular order with Comrade Mariama, who's from Senegal.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tout le monde. Ravi d'être ici pour parler un peu du Sénégal. Vous savez bien que le Sénégal a ratifié aussi l'accord de Paris, comme beaucoup d'entre nous qui sont là en Afrique. Et nous savons aussi que le Sénégal est un pays nouvellement gazier pétrolier et qui a beaucoup de ressources minières. Et nous disons qu'avec le Sud global, déterminé par une nouvelle géopolitique africaine et mondiale, le Sénégal se positionne. Donc, puisqu'il se positionne, il y aura beaucoup de pays qui sont à l'affût, comme la Chine, l'Inde, le Brésil et beaucoup d'entre eux, pour un partenariat parce qu'il y a le pétrole au niveau du Sénégal. Mais si nous parlons exactement de la privatisation de l'électricité au Sénégal, c'est un pays pauvre en électricité parce que pratiquement peu de ménages ont accès à l'électricité au Sénégal. Peut-être avec la nouvelle découverte du gaz, du pétrole, il y aura des changements, mais nous attendons pour le moment. On a fait une grande lutte avec notre centrale syndicale, l'UDTS, avec la société civile, pour lutter contre la privatisation de la Sénélec. Ça a été très dur avec l'ancien régime, mais on a pu quand même avoir gain de cause. Mais ça n'a pas duré parce qu'ils ont privatisé avec la France. Mais c'est par la suite, un autre nouveau gouvernement est venu, c'était avec Abdoulaye Wade. Lui, il a racheté la Sénélec pour que cette Sénélec soit aujourd'hui nationale. Et jusqu'à présent, nous luttons pour ça avec la société civile, avec les syndicats. Les syndicats du pays du Sud doivent renforcer leurs relations, développer des synergies par l'organisation de forats régionaux et internationaux pour une meilleure sensibilisation et conscientiser les travailleurs sur le nouvel ordre mondial et les opportunités qu'il offre. Mais il faut aussi développer des synergies renouvelables et les transports durables pour atténuer le changement climatique. Réduire les coûts de l'électricité, améliorer la santé publique et créer des emplois. Et avec l'ITF, au niveau du Sénégal, nous avons travaillé sur le nouveau système de bus à haut niveau de service, c'est le BRT au niveau du Sénégal. L'ITF a beaucoup travaillé et a apporté son soutien pour que cette BRT soit mise en place. Et actuellement, le BRT est mis en place et commence à rouler. Et ce BRT réduit davantage la pollution de l'air et améliore aussi la mobilité et stimule la productivité urbaine. Et pour dire que pour qu'on puisse lutter contre la privatisation, il faut des synergies d'action avec les syndicats. Et nous, au niveau du Sénégal, nous travaillons sur ça nuit et jour avec les autres centrales affiliées à la CSI, ainsi que l'ITF aussi sur le transport urbain. Il nous aide à lutter contre cette pollution-là et contre ces privatisations et sur aussi les transports durables. Bon, je n'ai pas beaucoup de temps pour parler d'autres, mais je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Comrade Mariama. You've set the tone and kept to 5 minutes, so unfortunately for the panel, that's what you're going to have to stick to. So the next speaker is Comrade Elyes of the UGTT.
Bonjour, salut syndicat. Je tiens à remercier tous les organisateurs de cet événement, surtout l'équipe TUED. Ok. Et je voudrais non parler de la zone Afrique du Nord. Oui, nous sommes fiers d'être africains, mais aussi nous appartenons à une autre zone plus large et qui ressemble à la zone d'Afrique du Nord. C'est la zone qu'on appelle dans les bouquins néolibérales, zone MENA, mais on n'aime pas cette appellation, c'est la zone arabe. Je vais faire un mapping sur cette zone et puis je vais rentrer dans les détails en Tunisie. Pour la zone arabe, on a 4 groupes, on peut différencier 4 groupes de pays. Il y en a les pays pétroliers. Et dans les pays pétroliers, on a 2 sous-groupes. Il y a l'Algérie, qui est un pays soi-disant souverain, c'est-à-dire indépendant de l'impérialisme américain et européen. Et il y a les pays du Golfe qui sont des pays suiveurs et même les traditions syndicales sont absentes. Il y a les pays touchés par la guerre, comme le Soudan, le Liban, l'Irak et la Libye, où il y a des problèmes d'accès à l'électricité. Un pays comme l'Irak, qui a les ressources pétrolières et gazières, il importe l'électricité de l'Iran. C'est malheureux de dire ça. Un pays qui, durant la dictature de Saddam Hussein, l'accès à l'électricité était une chose banale, mais maintenant, dans le rêve américain de liberté, le citoyen irakien ne trouve pas d'électricité. On trouve des groupes électrogènes dans les maisons et dans les appartements parce que l'État ne peut pas satisfaire leurs besoins. Et il y a le troisième, on a la Palestine qui est à côté, qui souffre d'un triple exploitation, colonisation, c'est-à-dire l'occupation, l'exploitation et aussi le pillage de ressources, comme on a vu à Gaza, comment les sionistes ont bombardé toutes les centrales électriques à Gaza. Et on a le quatrième groupe, c'est le groupe où des pays qui sont en voie de privatisation. Et dans ce pays, mon pays qui est la Tunisie, c'est le moins touché par cette vague de privatisation. Et ça, parce qu'il y en a des syndicats qui sont contre cette vague. Pour donner un bref historique sur la Tunisie, la Société tunisienne d'électricité et du gaz, qui est l'entité publique et qui détient tous les secteurs électriques maintenant en Tunisie, c'est-à-dire presque 100%, c'est le fruit du programme social économique de l'UGTT. Il faut rappeler ça. L'UGTT a donné son programme économico-social en 1955. Il l'a donné au parti de Stour, qui est le parti qui gouverne. Et le parti d'historiens a accepté ce programme qui est basé sur 2 choses. Les entreprises publiques et l'expérience coopérative. C'est-à-dire, on construit des entreprises publiques dans l'électricité, dans le pétrole, dans l'eau, dans les mines, le phosphate et tout ça, avec inciter les gens à faire des coopératives dans le milieu agricole. Cette vague a permis à électrifier tout le pays. Depuis les années 90, on a 100% d'électrification urbaine et presque 99% d'électrification rurale. Mais maintenant, avec la vague, surtout après la révolution, le processus révolutionnaire de 14 janvier 2011, il y a une vague de privatisation, surtout au niveau des énergies renouvelables, où les syndicats... Oh, une minute. Nous sommes bavards, hein, les syndicalistes. Non, je vais résumer. Je vais passer par qu'est-ce qu'on a fait en tant que syndicaliste. Pour défendre le service public, pour nous, tout est permis. On a fait plein de choses. On a fait les grèves, les mobilisations nationales et régionales. On a négocié avec le ministère de l'Énergie et même le gouvernement. On a bloqué la connexion des centrales privées pendant 2 années. On a fait des études, on a convaincu l'État à ne pas prolongé la concession pour les Américains et on a récupéré une centrale électrique qui était propriétaire par des Américains en Tunisie grâce à 2 études syndicalistes. Et moi-même, j'ai participé à la 2e étude syndicaliste. Aussi, on a créé le groupe de travail pour la démocratie énergétique, qui est une dynamique pour parvenir des alliés à la cause de l'entreprise publique en Tunisie. On a fait des études pour la transition juste en Tunisie et on a fait aussi une étude sur les méfaits du projet de l'interconnexion entre la Tunisie et l'Italie. Aussi, on a élaboré un article sur les méfaits du projet d'export de l'hydrogène vert de la Tunisie vers l'Europe. Okay. Pour résumer, qu'est-ce que je veux dire? Ah, excusez-moi, ma langue latale c'est l'arabe, hein, c'est le français. Je pense en arabe et je traduis en français. Hein. Gloire aux martyrs palestiniens, vive la classe ouvrière, vive les luttes du peuple opprimé. Thawra thawra hatta nasr. Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. Thanks. Okay.
Okay, Comrade Elyes, you're forgiven because you reminded us about the Palestinian struggle. But for the rest of the panel, we're going to have to try and stick to our time. The next speaker is Comrade Sandra van Niekirk. She's from PSI, but based in South Africa. Comrade Sandra, 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to try and learn from my comrade next door and not exceed my 5 minutes. I am from South Africa, but I'm not going to talk about South Africa because I actually work regionally in Africa with various countries on climate change and energy. I'm going to start with the first question that we were posed, just very briefly to talk about some of the regional approaches that we take to climate change and energy. And then I'm going to focus specifically on a country where we do have a project, Nigeria. So just to say that we don't ourselves engage governments around NDCs, climate change, etc. What we do is we help our affiliates build capacity and develop advocacy strategies, etc., in order for them to be able to engage. What we've found is that it is quite hard for affiliates directly to engage government. It often happens through the national center. Governments are often reluctant to engage unions on kind of climate change issues, you know, broader issues, socioeconomic issues, because they want to restrict unions to dealing only with wages and working conditions. The way we found that is the best way to deal with issues of climate change is engaging unions on a engaging government on a sectoral basis, so around particular public services. I'm going to focus in on energy. And just to say that when we talk about energy in Africa, we can't, we have to recognize that whenever we're talking about energy transitions in Africa, we have to factor in the issue of energy poverty and energy inequality. We can't talk about transition unless we're looking at how we actually extend energy access to the thousands of people who currently don't have electricity. So just, some of the things that we've done in the region around energy, one of our affiliates put forward a resolution to our National Congress in 2023 around financing the energy transition, which explicitly rejected the Just Energy Transition Partnership and called for financing which doesn't push countries further into debt or privatize energy services. And I think this, I mean, it came up yesterday, this issue of climate finance is obviously a key issue whenever we talk about energy transitions. We worked with Unison on developing a position paper on just energy transitions in Africa, which they then presented to the UK parliamentary, all-party parliamentary group for Africa. So those are some of the kind of more general things that the work that we've done around energy transitions in Africa. But just to talk very quickly, specifically about Nigeria, in 2012, 2013, we were very involved, very active with the electricity unions in fighting against the privatization of the electricity sector. The unions kind of launched, had a very militant, a very strong campaign against the privatization. Unfortunately, they lost, and Nigerian electricity was completely privatized, unbundled, and distribution companies and generation companies were sold off. So electricity in Nigeria is completely privatized. So, but what we're doing now with the electricity union, NUI, in Nigeria, and it's a pity that they couldn't be here, but we've got a project where we're linking with the electricity union and the health workers union. And on the understanding that there's a massive deficit in electricity generation in Nigeria, with the result that a lot of people, particularly in rural areas, resort to wood-burning fires to cook, particularly women. When I say people, I mean traditionally it's women who bear that burden, and thousands of women die from the pollution. So that adds a massive health burden on the health sector. In addition, Nigeria relies massively on generators. So constant load shedding, power cuts, switch over to generators, huge amounts of diesel and petrol is burned, which both contributes to emissions but also massive pollution and has health impacts. So we're saying that we're tying then an energy transition to renewable energy and the energy extension through public renewable energy to lessening the health burden. And lessening the health burden is particularly important because we know that climate change causes massive health, increases the health burden on the health sector. So it kind of, you need a transition to renewable energy, extension of that renewable energy as a way of also reducing the health burden that the country is facing. But in addition to that, the other kind of link between the two is that the health sector suffers from a lack of electricity. So often health facilities don't have reliable electricity. It impacts on operations, patient care, health storage of medicines. I mean, it has massive impacts if you don't have access to reliable electricity. So it kind of then is another argument for why you need a transition to reliable renewable energy. So that's the kind of work we're doing with our two affiliates in Nigeria at the moment. And I have been told to wrap up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Comrade Sandra. You add new dimensions to the value chain of the struggle in relation to energy. The next speaker is Comrade Rhoda from ITUC-Africa, and Comrade Rhoda, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I hope not to do more than 5 or probably even less. So comrades, yes, yesterday I think the tone was set. There was a lot of context laid on the Africa continent, and so I wouldn't really touch on the context. We heard much from Dr. Niekirk as well as Comrade Joel, who sort of laid the background on the energy situation in the continent. And so I'd like to just focus and narrow in on the union perspectives and what ITUC-Africa as a regional organization has been doing. But maybe it's important for the benefit of those who do not know ITUC-Africa to just give a bit of background. So ITUC-Africa is a regional organization for the International Trade Union Confederation, organizing in about 52 African countries, representing about 17 million workers across different sectors. And so our work actually cuts across all sectors. And we also work on various issues, not just climate and environment. However, I coordinate the work on climate and just transition, and I think it's important when we're looking at union action to lay to just make the case that over the years there has been a significant increase in the level of engagement of trade unions. So looking back to, let's say, 10 years ago, we have more trade unions actively engaging on climate and energy issues. However, it's also important for us to make the case that there's still a lot of work that has to be done in this regard. And so this relates to questions around building capacities, reinforcing, or coming up with research to really support the engagement of our affiliates at national level. Now, at the regional level, specifically for ITUC-Africa, I think yesterday that was also mentioned, that the last quadrennial Congress of ITUC-Africa adopted a resolution on just energy, just transition and climate action. And what was a milestone in this resolution was that there was reference to the public pathway in line with the TUED principles. And so this actually gives us a mandate to work on energy transition, but specifically focusing on the public pathway. And so for the next 4 years, there's a lot of work that has been designed around this. But the work of ITUC-Africa really focuses on providing support to our affiliates within the specific countries where we have affiliates. And so most of the work is done at national level. At the level of ITUC-Africa, however, our focus is really engaging at global level as well as engaging at regional level. And over the past few years, there has been a lot of work that has been going on in line with climate action, just transition, and specifically around energy transition. And so some of these I would just highlight. A lot of work at the global level around within the UNFCCC spaces at the level of COP, where we always try to design or come up with a position paper specifically providing or highlighting what the issues are within the continent and making a case about why the COP should actually adopt a position that would be in favor of workers, but also workers specifically in the global south. And so this year, once again, before COP, we did this, where we came up with a position paper that clearly highlighted the situation within the continent, highlighting the specific situation within the continent around energy, and coming up with some claims. But as you all know, the COP didn't really come up with favorable resolutions in our favor. And so this actually calls for us to really intensify action. And one way we have decided to do this is not to wait and start really lobbying at the COP or before the COP. At the level of ITUC-Africa, what we have said is that we need to begin engagement right from now. And so how do we ensure that we are working with different stakeholders, but specifically also working with the African group of negotiators prior to the COP to really build and push forward what we want at COP30. Now, one area of work, or one strategic pillar of our work that guides our work is campaigning and alliance building. And I think this is very important even for us in our energy transition work. Because we see that, or what we have come to see is that trade unions tend to really talk amongst ourselves. Over the years, there's a lot of discussions, capacity building, but it's all focused internally. And more, we're seeing the need for us to build a broad movement. And so at the level of ITUC-Africa, there's conscious efforts for us to engage with progressive with progressive CSOs, progressive environmental groups within the continent. And we do this through networking and working together in specific spaces to push the energy transition processes. And so just really rounding up, and I think this is important because whilst we lay the context and we also share strategies, I think it's always important for us to look ahead. What is the way forward and how do we want to advance our action? So at ITUC-Africa, we are saying that it is important for us to continue to build the capacities of our affiliates. A lot of us here in this room actually are working on the specific issues and so really have a plethora of knowledge and information, but there's also a lot of trade unions out there who need to really join or come into the circle, and it's important for us to continue to build capacities. But secondly, it's important for us to map out spaces for engagement. And I think that within our countries at national level, a lot of us do that already, at regional level, at global level. But again, I think as a network at TUED, we really need to come up and find and have a calendar of events that we want to engage in. And so at the level of Africa, we are targeting a number of events that would happen over the year, where we can engage with the environment and energy ministers, the Africa Climate Summit. There's supposed to be an Africa Energy Conference. It's important that we find representation and ensure that we have specific people engaging in these processes to push forward our agenda, to push forward our position. It's also important for us to, as I said, strengthening and deepening alliances. This is something we need to do, and I'm very happy to see this. I was saying to someone this morning, TUED is really good at bringing together the best people. And I think this is something we need to replicate within our countries at different levels. Identify progressive people, because we are fighting, the forces we are fighting against are powerful. And the only way we would win or gain traction or make any progress is if we really build a mass movement. And so I think it's very important for us to do this. Lastly, waging campaigns. And so whilst we have very good data and analysis, how do we ensure that we take forward these within our specific countries? We need to really invest in waging anti-privatization campaigns, and I think this is something that we have to consider in the years ahead. Within specific countries, I like the example of Nigeria. Ghana recently is starting to discuss privatizing the energy sector, the electricity sector, and I think if affiliates within these countries really can be supported to push and wage forward campaigns on anti-privatization, we could really win some successes. Thank you very much, and I hope I remained within the time.
Thank you, Comrade Rhoda. We understand, I mean, there are many issues to cover and the time's limited. Comrade Tanya is our next speaker. She is the head of policy at the South African Federation of Trade Unions called COSATU. So I hand over to you. 5 minutes now, Comrade Tanya.
So, comrades, there's been so much rich discussion. I want to just bring in a different perspective, because we've been talking about the struggle up here. We engage in policy. In South Africa, we go to parliament, we negotiate national legislation, we negotiate policy. The space is open. But the danger is we open space to engage and the bosses walk through. We have the knowledge. Knowledge is power, but at the end of the day, power is power. And power comes from the ground. So I want to give a few examples of the work that we're doing on the ground to show that the struggle is at all levels. I was running workshops on just transition and chatting to workers saying, "Comrade, how has climate change impacted your life?" So one person, I felt like I was in a New York movie scene, says, "I'm a crime scene investigator." He says, "It's getting hotter and hotter. When we go and look at the bodies, the sweat is running down our faces because we can't contaminate the scene can't contaminate us. Sweat is pouring down, and the bodies are decaying faster. I go, sure, that's a story. Another comrade, what's your story? She says, I'm a nurse. More and more people are coming with lung disease. But you know what? We don't have the medicine always to help them. The electricity goes on when we're busy trying to operate on someone who's got appendix. The water isn't there. We can't not even sterilize. We can't clean the toilets, right? In discussing, we say, this is linked to austerity. Government is not giving you the money to get the proper equipment and poles. It's linked to everyday struggles of workers. We negotiate health and safety in the workplace every day. Have you negotiated new PPE so that when you're looking at the dead bodies, you're not drowning in sweat? And comrades are then making the link, saying, we can fight. We can fight for PPE. We can fight for more resources. We can fight to make sure we have electricity, which means we fight against privatization. They're ready. They're engaging on the shop floor now. We say, but what's happening in your local government? Your local municipality is not paying the money for electricity to the electricity company, the state-owned electricity company. The state-owned electricity company is on its knees because the officials in your government are not paying. What can you do about that? They say, we'll go and talk to them about the budget. We'll go and tell them to stop driving big Mercedes-Benz and to pay the electricity bill and to make sure we get the clothes we need. We'll make sure that the teachers who've been retrenched are put back. So it's from the shop floor to the municipality to the province. That momentum, that anger, that disappointment, that frustration gives us the mandate at national level to engage. In Parliament, someone says, oh, you're talking ideology. Privatization, anti-privatization ideology. I said, let me show you ideology on the ground when this nurse in the dark can't give her patients bandages. What ideology is that? So as we're linking those struggles and we're encouraging comrades to fight at every level, to make sure that collective bargaining agreements are met and workers are paid basic stuff, we link those struggles. We're moving now towards a national strike when the budget is presented next month. Because the demands are clear, anti-austerity, anti-privatization. The federations, all the federations are working on it together. We can have lots of petty squabbles here and there, but no one's going to say they're for privatization. It helps unite us. At the same time, it helps unite us with community members as well. So comrades, my message, what we're trying to do, and it's a struggle, is we must keep mobilizing at all levels. Education and knowledge must be transmitted into demands on bosses, demands on government. We build our strength, we build our confidence, and most important, we build our organizations, because everyday workers are seeing us win things for them on the shop floor. And that's, comrades, where we're focusing now, is building power and advancing the struggle at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Tanya, for those South African reflections. Comrade Kolil is from a Kenyan union, KETAWU, but I just wanted to point out to him, I'm not sure if him and Comrade Elyes realize they're a minority gender on this panel. So the Africa panel has a majority of women, which we say viva. But given your minority status, we give you the last say for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, comrades. As I take you through the struggles, I may not call them the struggles really, but if I take you through the process and what we are advocating for, I just want, Kamanzi, if you just put it up, I want us to discuss on that template, and that will be enough for me to discuss with you and also to be able to show you some of the areas that we really need to fight. That is an institutional framework of the energy sector in Kenya. It is a reflection also of East African community, that is Tanzania, Uganda, and, Rwanda and Burundi. They were building on the same line. And for Kenya, we are building based on the 5 power pools in Africa. This is the East African power pool, and the focus will be within sharing resources on that. So what is very clear there, we have generation. And generation, you'll realize we have KenGen. It will reflect almost similar scenario in Uganda and Tanzania. Then KenGen is the main electricity generating company in Kenya. It is state-owned, but it is state-owned. 85% is owned by the state. So it is one of the reflections that even the state-owned companies in generation can be run efficiently. And if you have an opportunity, just Google about KenGen. It's a reflection of how a publicly owned company can generate more and have proper governance. Then we have GDC. GDC actually was a department in KenGen, but when it offered its shares to the public, it was fully funded by the government. So in yesterday's presentation, you remember there was a lot of issue about de-risking. So GDC, which was a department of KenGen, had to be put aside to be government fully owned to de-risk KenGen. And that is there. Then you can see the IPPs. We also have a blend of IPPs, which are mainly owned. We have what we call Globalec, which is the British arm. It also owns some of the IPPs. We have Power, which is American. It also runs a few IPPs. We have Rabai Power, which is a Netherlands and Holland pension schemes running. That is in the coast of Kenya. So that is how it is structured. Now, where is the bigger struggle now do we have? We have challenges now in transmission. I'm sure you're aware of an investor called Adani Energies. Late last year, Adani wanted to take up KETAWU. KETAWU is fully government owned. It's called Kenya Electricity Transmission Company. But there was a private initiative by a company called Adani. He is an Indian. I understand also he was operating in Indonesia. We raised issues of why should we have Adani be given the power to manage the entire transmission company. If generation is partially owned by the government, why would we let transmission now be fully owned by a private company? And the company which we had questions about the integrity. And we are going to discuss some of the areas that we had to combine with the even Institute of Engineers to be able to lay our claims that we don't need transmission to be privatized. The reason is it will affect generation, it will affect distribution, and it will affect the pricing. Because Adani will require to recoup its investment in the transmission line. How does it do that? That is done through wheeling charges. And that will have a spiral effect on the pricing. The other major struggle which has been there is also on the one you are seeing as KPLC. It is still publicly owned. The government owns 51%, but the rest are owned by institutional investors, which are mainly the banks. There has been a drive towards privatizing Kenya Power and Lighting, which is the main distribution company. But as workers and even as workers, we have been, as union and the workers, we have been able to fight this with one premise, that Kenya, we are Energy, in terms of capacity, we are still very low. We are at around 3,000 megawatts. Yet the demand, the effective demand, the demand is around 23. So what do we do about that? What do we do about coverage? Yes, we have improved comparatively compared to Uganda and Tanzania. Kenya is now at 83% coverage. It's a small country with a 40 million population. But we want the electricity to be available at a cost which each and every person can afford. And I wish I had time to have shown you some of these. So the struggle in KPLC has been, we are being blamed as workers that we are not being efficient. So how do we as workers not be productive while we expect that it is the government and even the chair, the board of directors who should be ensuring that there is a strategy which is well known by the workers. So we have to build a lot of alliances with the PSI. Dr. Evelyn is there. She has been very instrumental in us campaigning against privatization, both in Kenya and Tanzania. She has been very instrumental also in issues of climate change and other partners. We have been raising all those issues. So finally, we have rural electrification. ITUC-Africa have spoken. It runs across the entire Africa that we have a rural electrification authority. But in Kenya, we had to rename rural electrification and renewable. It is charged with a component of solar to do that. But within the entire the 5 pools of Africa, there is a rural electrification component, which we appreciate that ITUC-Africa and has really been pushing to ensure that there is fairness in that. And finally, I know there's been issues of how do we go forward? We are working, and I appreciate that part of the research yesterday was to have a new approach in the financial architecture. How do we fund public services, especially electricity, without having the debt component being a burden? How do we ensure that the funding itself, or even the IPPs, it is not pegged on the euro or the dollar? You know the financing models. They're pegged either on the euro and the dollar. So what happens when there are swings within the economy? That means if you are to pay, like for instance in Kenya, if the exchange rate to the dollar was 100, if there'll be changes, then again you'll pay at an exchange rate of $1 to 150. So what does that mean in between? And I'm happy that World Bank, I'm sure most of you will have time, World Bank has changed its model slightly in Kenya. It has advised the Kenya Power that any debt that is going to be given, there are certain specific performance indicators, and Kenya will repay using the Kenya shillings, not the dollar. And we are happy that that was part of the push which we agitated. And the new administration of Dr. Ruto, despite the ups and downs, as I summarize, they wanted to have a new architecture in terms of how we are, the financing model. I've shared with our researcher, Kamanzi, I'm sure you'll share with the team, some of the concrete reports which were done, which initiated by the union and even a letter by the union, looking at the capacity charge. Why do we pay capacity charge for idle power? Because it is the model of IPP is take or pay. So you have no option, you have no room. Can we be able to negotiate? With that, I really want to wrap up. Thank you so much. And thank the team. I'm sure the ladies have given us a lot of encouragement. You know what it means. And we really appreciate that there is a good mainstreaming. So we want to see it also in other continents. Thank you so much.
Thank you, comrades from the panel, first and foremost, for sharing those experiences. Time works against us, so we couldn't allow you to share as much as you wanted. We must thank everyone for their patience, but I want to end on this one thing. In South Africa, we have an old slogan called each one, teach one. We hope some of these panel presentations do exactly that. Thank you, Amandla.
Thanks, everyone, for another great panel. We're going to take a 10-minute break. If you can come back at, I think, 11:35 in 10 minutes, 11:35 for the last roundtable for the Latin American Caribbean region. That would be great. Okay, thanks, everybody.